Are you struggling for consistency in your sim racing? Does your iRating look like a roller coaster? If so, we have good news for you. The way to get more consistent is to first understand what you're doing differently than the professionals. And VRS is the answer. With our competitive subscription, you will have the telemetry, setups, tutorials, and everything else you need to fully analyze your driving. Our data packs and the ability to compare your driving with the best in the world will show you exactly where to adjust your inputs, change your driving line, and shave seconds off of your lap times. And our powerful and precise Direct Force Pro wheelbase and precision pedals are being used by some of the world's best drivers. All these champions agree that VRS hardware is not just the best on the market, it's also priced well below the competition. So if you're looking to upgrade to direct drive and the best pedals in sim racing, VRS is your answer. If you want to get better, get faster, and make it happen sooner rather than later, you owe it to yourself to find out why so many people are switching to VRS. You'll be so glad that you did. Visit www.virtualracingschool.com and learn why the best use VRS.
Well, good afternoon everyone, and welcome back here to Super Sunday here on Apex Racing TV and the Weekend Warriors series, where first up as always we've got the Formula Fords. My name is Ron Mullins, alongside me in the commentary booth is Charles Bichelle, and in the virtual production hall, however, old buddy Joshua Wilkie. Now today we're at Snetterton on the 300 layout, a very well-rounded old school track with quite a lot of challenge thrown in as well. This track is a hoot, to invoke a little bit of 1920s diction. But Charles, towards the end of last week's broadcast, you talked about the things that make Snetterton the unique and enjoyable racetrack that it is. Now that we're here, would you like to elaborate on that a little bit here at the top of the show?
Yeah, it is, as you said, an old school track. There are some challenges that are in this track, but it's a very, I guess, a flat circuit, and not a lot of elevation. There's a little bit here and there, but some of the elevation will be catching the drivers out, and we'll talk about that a little more later. But yeah, it's an old school British track, pretty flat. The 300 layout is the longest layout, so we get a little bit of an infield section, and it's going to make things a little bit more challenging because there's some pretty fast corners through there, so that'll make the racing that much better. So I'm looking forward to this. It's going to be a fun race today.
Yeah, this track is really fun. I think these drivers will enjoy it as well, unlike Belle Isle that we were at last week, which is extremely unforgiving with pretty much little to no runoff area around that circuit. Snetterton here is pretty much the complete opposite. It's not a street circuit, it's a permanent track with a very forgiving runoff area. That small little patch of gravel on the outside of turn number 1 is, I think, one of the only gravel traps that they have on this entire circuit. So grass runoff area. I'm sure the landscaping crews here at Snetterton, both in real life and in the sim, will probably be looking for some new employment if we have some drivers go off the circuit throughout this race. However, the drivers are going to enjoy it. There's also some good overtaking opportunities as well. We're not seeing one of them right now. However, we are coming up to one here in a couple of moments' time, that being the hairpin of turn number 4. Now, this corner, I think, will probably be a very action-packed spot here at this circuit. So, Charles, do you think there's any other parts of the track that we need to keep our eye out coming into this race?
Oh, wow. Yes, as a matter of fact. So turn 1, obviously a pretty fast corner at the start of the race. However, you want to try and run those inside curves, but the problem with the turn 1 curves is there is a little bit of an elevation change there. It's kind of an uphill, and so the curbs have, I guess, what I would call stair steps in them. So if you catch those, basically it's going to send you up in the air and across the track. Obviously, turn 2, first hairpin that we're going to encounter, really good chance to make an overtake. Heavy braking zone gets you to run down into turn 3, which is a tighter, a little more open. It's not a true hairpin, but it's a nice, over 90-degree left-hander, which takes you down into turn 3, which is another almost hairpin. And then that gets you through the technical section of the infield, which is really the most technical section of the track. And then as we go on, we'll talk about the backstretch going into Brundle, which is just an insanely tricky chicane to have to deal with. It's a very fast left-hander followed by a very tight right-hander with a giant sausage curb on the inside. It's really easy to just break your car on that sausage curb. I've seen Porsche Cup cars being overturned because they've hit that the wrong way. So it's a very challenging. And then we've got Bomb Hole, which is actually a hole from a bomb that landed there during World War II, that they basically just said, you know what, we'll just throw some more fresh tarmac over it. It'll be fine. And we'll upset the car. So that'll be another challenge before we get to the end of the lap.
Well, we're currently here in this qualifying session with these drivers tackling the big curves there. That was a big hit for Sam Spinell heading through the turn 9 and chicane. That was Nelson, the corner that he went through, turn number 10, that is. Second part of that chicane running into the turrets. As I said towards the start of the broadcast, the landscaping crews at this virtual version of Snetterton are not going to be happy with a whole lot of these drivers. But I think now that we're in this qualifying session and have a little bit of time before we get into crunch time, I think we'll take a look at the championship results. We are coming into crunch time for this season, this being one of the later rounds of the season. We're getting a good idea as to who the stars of this season have really been. We're going to pull up the S1 results here, and you can see Jason Green at the front, 591 points there at the front of the board in the number 160 car. Michael McConnell there in second. Sam Spinell in third, the Brit looking to try and stake his claim on his championship challenge this season, currently 80 points back of our leader Green. Then you've got Benjamin Harris and Jeff Jacobson going to be rounding out your top 5. Yanchi Lin and Arrow Gnome, Simon Ball, Trent Kramer, and Thortulo. A lot of good drivers in the S1 category, a lot of race winners from that class as well. Then moving over to S2, it's a little bit more one-sided here. Julian Dishburn, the Canadian driver, is currently 99 points ahead of Peter True in P. Number 2, David Foy in third, Philip Fernandez in fourth, and Paul Stevens is going to be rounding at the top 5 in the S2 category. I think our Canadian producer is very happy that a Canuck is at the front by 99 points heading into the final few rounds of the season. And now, Charles, you've always wanted to keep an eye out on Masters, so how's that championship fight looking now?
Always. Let's look at the old guys. Dana Bowes up in P1, 461 points. Antonio Race, just 21 points behind in second. Chris Murakami only 2 points back in third. Then we've got Cathcart, DeGassis, Brewster, Monty, Nick Tolo, and Manning Grennan. So it's SR Gary Rollbolt to round out the top 10. So yeah, still pretty tight up at the top of the Masters class. So still lots of battling to be done with a few races left. Could turn itself upside down in a heartbeat.
Hopefully now these drivers don't get turned upside down quite literally in this race, but Masters has been topsy-turvy all throughout the season. This man, Yorick Mani, I'm not going to mention the word that starts with L, as you see in the middle, and it ends with a K. He's currently P1 in this qualifying session with about 3.5 minutes left to go here. That is quite impressive from him. He's had a topsy-turvy year, and really in the Masters category as a whole, it's been topsy-turvy. But so far, as we're actually going through, as we have a little bit of a bump and run heading through that turn 4 hairpin. I think that's more of a bump there, and actually getting towed around on the back of Jorg Mani's race car. But touching back on the Masters Championship fight, it's been topsy-turvy, up and down. Any synonym that you want to use. Cinnamon is a nice thing to season something with, but no, to use any synonym that you want. It's been a dramatic championship fight in that Masters category, but as of late, it's been Antonio Race actually trying to stake his claim and get up towards the front of that category. In the past 2 races that we've seen here from the Formula Ford Weekend Warriors, he's finished top of the Masters, has actually finished P3 overall in both of those races, those two being quite different. However, here, heading into Snetterton, do you think he's going to try and continue that streak, or do you think York Mani is going to try and play spoiler with Antonio Reese's party?
Oh no, it's ever since I've started doing this for 4 seasons or so, it's been pretty much Jorgmani, Antonio Reyes, Chris Murakami. Those are the three guys in the Formula Fords that just week in and week out were at the top of the board. Sometimes running, even top in podium positions overall. So these guys will give it their all week in and week out. And yeah, it's just been a not a great season for our defending champion Jorgmani in the Masters class. So yeah, he's anytime we talk with him, as always, he's out there having fun. He really doesn't care, but I think everybody cares a little bit whether they do well, get a victory. As long as he's out there doing his best, then he's happy with it. And I'm just there's a few weird things that have happened to him during the season, not of his making. It hasn't put him up to the top. So yeah, Antonio will be out there trying to close the gap up to P1 and take the championship this season.
Jorgmani has been abducted by UFOs and struck by falling anvils. Hopefully here in the UK sun, that won't happen here. And speaking of the UK sun, usually we like to talk about the weather forecast heading into these Formula Ford Weekend Warriors races. Since they do have rain with these cars, rain is not going to be a factor, a 0% chance of rain. I think this may be the racing/weather gods trying to make a fool out of me, because I think it was at Brands Hatch earlier on in the season. I was genuinely flabbergasted that in the early spring it wasn't raining at a track in the UK. Snetterton right now is beautiful in real life and in the city. Meanwhile, here on the east coast of the US, it has been raining for the past like 23 hours or something like that, and it's about 48 Fahrenheit right now, so not very good outside for me. However, for these drivers, it is absolutely beautiful track conditions that they find here in this qualifying session. 30 seconds left to go. It's Sam Spinell at the front at a 157.463. Jorgmani still holding on to that P2 spot right now. Nick Von Roberts is currently in P number 4. As things stand at the moment, he would be joined on the front row by a newcomer here in this series, that being Brit Alex Bomberg. His entry into the series was only approved about a half an hour ago, so he has hit the ground running here with this series with the checkered flag out in this qualifying session. He is going to look to try and improve, maybe get onto the front row. However, for the newcomer, a P3 result in this qualifying session would be absolutely fantastic. We're now in crunch time, and we're seeing some drivers set some pretty good lap times. Another driver who may be a newcomer, if any viewers are watching the stream are brand new, they may not recognize his name. We certainly do. It's Megan Overstreet back to the series. Had some work-related commitments that have taken her out of both the Ray Esports series every Tuesday here on Apex Racing TV, as well as a Weekend Warrior. She's currently running in P11. A pretty good result from her, considering this is her first Formula Ford Weekend Warriors race in quite some time, as Bomberg moves ahead of Monty in the dying stages of this qualifying session. Pretty nice lap time from the Bruin, the number 14 car.
Yeah, it was a great debut. Methinks that we have a ringer amongst us. I think Alex may be quite familiar with this track. He said, "Hell, this will be fun. So let's go out here and try this." So yeah, it's good to see Megan back. Yeah, obviously she's been a mainstay both in this series and in the Ray Esports series on Tuesday nights. And just work says, "Hey, we need you to start working in the afternoons," and she says, "Okay." So I did hear in the voice chat talking to some other drivers, and she said, "Yep, I've got a day off today, so I'm gonna come out and race." So we're happy to see her. And 11th is probably just for a little bit of rust, a little rig rust as we call it. And my guess is she'll be competing for a top 10 before it's all said and done.
I just like seeing Megan Overstreet back on the racetrack. She'll definitely be in contention for a top 10. She is a wonderful human being and a racer at heart. There is a program with Grass Pack Motorsports to put some drivers behind the wheel of some race cars. There's a competition for drivers with an SCCA road racing license and drivers without a road racing SCCA license. Megan Overstreet was the winner of the category of drivers without a road racing license. But it was nice to see her out on the racetrack. Right now, that's a big snap heading through the final corner of Murray's turn number 13. Megan Overstreet pulling into the pit. So the qualifying session has wrapped up here. So we're going to be seeing some drivers pull into the pits here in the not too distant future. And yeah, just absolutely awesome to see Megan Overstreet back on the racetrack. And while we have, I think this is probably the calm before the storm, I think we'll just, Charles, what are your final thoughts heading into the race that we have here in the not too distant future?
Yeah, obviously, you know, we always talk about the start of the race, getting everybody at least single file as quickly as they can without taking any cars out. Turn one's really tricky. Especially on cold tires. I'm sure we'll see a couple of cars go wide, and hopefully we won't see any cars go narrow, because if they go narrow, then that might be a little bit of trouble for the cars behind.
I think we have some more cars waiting around, getting a bit more added seat time here before things wrap up and we head into this race that we have coming up in just a couple of moments' time. This is going to be absolutely dramatic and exciting to watch as well, and I think we will be able to get the starting grid for you in just a couple of moments' time. A packed grid for the Formula Ford Weekend Warriors. That's going to be Sam Spinell leading them to green. Alex Bomberg, a fellow Brit and the newcomer to the series, is going to be starting alongside him on the front row. Jörg Mani, the Masters driver, in P number 3. Fantastic qualifying session from him. Then Nick Vaughn Roberts in 4th. Roger Hooker there in P number 5. Thor Tulo in 6th. Jason Green in 7th. Antonio Reese, another Masters driver, in P number 8. Michael McConnell in 9th. Julian Dishper in the top of the S2 drivers will round out your top 10.
Yeah, in P11, we've got the aforementioned Megan Overstreet, Chris Montgomery, Spec 2 drivers in 12th, Alan DeGassis, Masters driver 13th, David Foy in 14th, Paul Stevens and Benjamin Harris on row 8, Pedro Carvalho, Philip Fernandez on row 9, and Jim Brewster and Peter True round out your top 20.
And looking through, Brad Cathcart, Paul Jackson, Russell Teckler, and Greg Holland is going to round out your top 24. Nick Tulo there in P25. Morn Human, the South African driver, in P26. Tim Steno not saying a qualifying time, along with Johan Batigna there in P28. Jeff Jacobson in 29th. John Toms in 30th. And we can go through the rest of the field, I believe, or is that it for the other drivers? 30 cars. Okay, 30 cars, and even 30, a nice 30. Always good to have some round numbers here for this series. Now, the Formula Fords are always fantastic in the Ray Esports Racing League. They're sponsored by Sim Motion over there on the Ray Esports Racing League. Maybe it'd be nice if they were to move over here to the Weekend Warriors series as well, like Personal Well Solutions has on the SRF side of things. Don't have a sponsor here for the Formula Ford Weekend Warriors. However, it would be nice if we do, because this grade racing is absolutely incredible. I guess we got to pay our producer Josh's $14 bajillion paycheck every single podcast. So I think before we took a bit, our producer Josh saying, I wish to as well, buddy. I wish to. So we're seeing the drivers a shortened pace lap here, so not a whole lot of time before we're ready to rock and roll from Snetterton, the green fields in the UK. We're gonna see if any drivers end up in those green fields on this first lap. The Porsche pace car has gone down pit lane. The field is now in the hands of Sam Spinell. He's already gone away already. The green flag is out now, and the drivers are on their way. It's a very early jump there, it must be said, from Sam Spinell. He's going to lead them into turn number 1, unless the newcomer has anything to say about Bomberg. Looking down the inside, not close enough to get the move done. Meanwhile, farther behind's got some drivers shuffling for positions and going side by side, heading through the challenging turn number 1. Then we head into the hairpin of Montreal, turn at number 2. Megan Overstreet nearly making a 3 wide farther in the back, but all these drivers negotiating that hairpin clean on the first time by with that killer curb on the inside, a very heavy braking zone, and some cold tires. I was expecting turn number 2 to be a bit more of a shamazo than we just saw. However, all of these drivers proving me wrong and coming through quite clean.
Yeah, a good start by everybody. Didn't see anybody taking to the grass. So as I spoke too soon. There's the 347 of Greg Holland, just running a little deep coming out of that corner. But for the most part, nobody damaged. So we're going to continue the race.
All these drivers running silky smooth right now. We'll see if that changes between now and the checkered flag. This 40-minute race has a whole lot of challenge for these drivers to try and negotiate, but right now Sam Spinell is putting on a masterclass. He's leading it right now, coming onto the Bentley straightaway for the first time by. Exited Williams, turn number 8, another challenging bend where track limits are a big issue outside of that corner. These drivers will have to worry about incident points. However, that will probably be a factor later on in this race. Now for the start, these drivers are just going to be racing each other and giving it absolute hell here trying to get any single position they can, and we may see a change for position up towards the front. Actually, no, it's a little bit smoother. Right behind them, though, I will say it's not looking too it's looking good for the newcomer. He's started this race in second. Alex Bomberg is still running in second. However, York Money is quite close to him right behind, and ooh, Sam Spinell running wide, heading through the final corner, as is York Money. So right as I was saying, that we may see a battle for P2. Now we're seeing a battle for the lead. Bomberg and Spinell going side by side down the start-finish straightaway to complete lap number 1, or any of these drivers going to back out of it. Heading through the first corner, Spinell pulls in behind him. Monty trying to get that move done to hold on to P at number 4 from Vaughn Roberts right behind.
Yeah, it was a nice move by Bomberg to take the lead as we're going down here into turn 2. That hairpin, got to be very careful of that sausage curb on the inside. So far, everybody's done a really good job. Haven't seen, as I see now, Cathcart falling down the order, so maybe just a little deep there coming through the hairpin, coming out of turn 1. Let's see if we can get a replay from Josh here as we see Cathcart coming down into turn 2. Sorry, that's turn 1. We'll get that right in a minute. And just that outside curve, just maybe touch a little bit of the grass with the right or with the left rear tire, and just kind of loses the car. Manages to graze off the Armco on the inside and continue on.
That was a pretty substantial whack into that inside barrier. I would not be too shocked at all if Brad Cathcart comes into the pits at the end of this lap. It still looks like that car is driving fairly straight and true. So I think Brad Cathcart got away with that, surprisingly so. That was a big moment heading through turn number 1. Don't see too many drivers hit the inside wall heading through that section. There's pretty much no outside wall to hit. This is Roger Hooker battling hard with Antonio Reese, who's made his way up into P number 5. Nice race so far from the Portuguese driver with the number 914 car. Will we see him challenge Monty for the lead in the Masters category? I'd certainly hope so, because it'd be nice to have a battle in that Masters category. Julian Ditchburn, meanwhile, in S2, he is pulling away from that. Currently, it's a nice gap between himself and Stevens in that category. So Julian Ditchburn currently hanging on to a top 10 spot right now. I believe it was Ditchburn that actually won overall back at Oschersleben a few weeks ago in the rain. So we'll see if he can try and replicate a result like that here in the final few weeks here of the Formula Ford Weekend Warriors season. This is Nick Vaughn Roberts that we're riding on board with, heading his way through turn at number 1. You can see the drivers right behind shuffling for grip. Finding the grip around this racetrack is pretty difficult, as we see some hard racing there. It looked like Vaughn Roberts nearly made contact with Monty heading into the hairpin of Montreal, turn number 2. Then they go into the infield section. This section it's all about managing your expectations, managing your grip, managing your tires, and trying not to fall to the red mist. It's very easy to get caught up in a battle and get caught up in a train, as we see a massive pack of Formula Ford cars at the front of this field. Haven't seen too many incidents so far. Knowing Marlick, I probably just jinxed it.
Yeah, maybe. So I was watching from the Vaughn Roberts front-facing cam as we get a look behind from Bomberg, looking back at Spinell. The front 3 missed the first little stair step on the inside curb coming through turn 1, but all of them hit that curb, and it seemed like the car did okay with it, didn't have any issues. But Roberts seemed like he got a really good run by not attacking those curbs, and made it a little challenging for Monty going into the first hairpin there at turn 2.
And we're heading into the chicane of turns 9 and 10. Brundle and Nelson, and we've got Bomberg and Spinell at the front of the field. Spinell actually dropping back a little bit, so Bomberg starting to pull away. Currently over a half a second separating those two, which is basically nothing here. However, with a massive pack of Formula Ford cars right behind, it is a pretty big march right now. Some shuffling heading through the long second to last corner of Cornham, turn number 12 there. Hard racing for all of these drivers. They're not giving a quarter on their racetrack, and they don't expect a quarter to be given to them, as we see Vaughn Roberts trying to get a move done around the outside, heading into turn number 1 on Monty, who's going to back out of this. There's a whole lot of runoff areas, so these drivers don't really have to risk it too much. However, Vaughn Roberts is sticking it around the outside and going into the grass on the outside of the corner. He is giving it everything he can to try and overtake Jorg Monty, who's a Masters leader right now, and it looked like Antonio Reese, who's running second in that Masters category, may get a move done
Good
on
run.
Vaughn Roberts, a close up to his Masters competitor. Hard racing so far, and we're not even 7 minutes into this 40-minute affair here.
Yeah, it's been pretty frantic up at the front. Yeah, it looked like Spindle and Monty almost got together, I think, through either 13 or 14, where they just, maybe Spindle just didn't have quite the pace. And as we're seeing, we're going to look back here. This is Greg Holland. Just coming down into turn 4. Yeah, spin in front, and I think that's Stano, as we see spinning on the outside of turn 4 there.
It's very easy to make a mistake heading through that corner. One of the challenging ones as well. There's around a track like this, usually at a track like Spa, for instance, you have some sections around the circuit that you can use as braking markers. Here at this track, there's pretty much no sort of reference that anyone can use. The biggest hills around this track, besides the one that the spectators stand on, are really those inside monster sausage curves. So we're going to see some drivers get caught at by the challenging bends around this circuit. This is Julian Ditchburn, who is still leading in the S2 category, running in P number 10, and he has a nice gap between himself and Stevens, who's currently running 14th overall and second in that S2 category. Julian Ditchburn has just, usually we don't see dominance when it comes to the championship fights in this Formula Ford series. However, Julian Ditchburn is looking to buck that trend, and with the gap that he has right now, I wouldn't be too shocked if he actually clinches the championship a few weekends early here, Charles.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. He's just been on a tear lately. Obviously, you talked about his overall win at Oschersleben a few weeks ago in the rain, but I was doing a great job running the top 10 overall. As we see there, Megan Overstreet, big gap between her and Ditchburn is almost 5.5 seconds. So I don't know if she may be the proverbial cork in the bottle here in this little group of cars. Her and DeGasses, Harris, Stevens, and Foy, and then another 3 seconds back to Fernandez in P16.
Quite fitting that we mentioned Cork for the first time on one of these Formula Ford Weekend Warriors broadcasts at track in the UK. I think there is a town in the UK named Cork. Actually, no, that's Cork, Ireland. I'm going to get some hate comments for that, but before I confuse the UK and Ireland again, I think we'll touch on the top 10 pack right now, separated by 2.5 seconds right now between this man, Alex Bomberg, and our final top 10 runner of Julian Ditchburn. I think that was probably one of the worst gaffes I've ever had. Yes, Cork, Ireland, the famous UK town. You can tell I was always great in geography class, folks. Alex Bomberg is leading them heading onto the Bentley straightaway on this 5th lap here. We're about to head into the second 10 minutes of this race, and we've already had a whole lot of drama, and we have some coming up very, very soon. Is Monty. That was a perfectly timed call for me. Monty looked like he was going to try and go down the inside of turn number 9 to move into P2 from Sam Spinell. That would have been a very bold move if the Masters driver went for that one.
Yeah, that would have been. Yeah, you were talking about it earlier. This is a pretty flat track. There's not a lot of camber in the corners. I guess with the exception of Bomb Hole, where it feels like you're on a roller coaster ride there for just a couple of seconds, and it just kind of will help you work your way through there, the compression and then the lift coming out. But yeah, for the most part, it's pretty flat all the way around. As we said, there's a couple of little small elevation changes, but nothing real major right now. As we see Antonio Race coming into the pits very early. I think he's deciding we're going to try an undercut today.
Ooh, meanwhile, Jörg Monty looking for a bold move down the inside heading into turn number 2. I think he'll be able to clear him heading into the hairpin of turn 2 here. That was close. Heading through turn number 1, Jörg Monty gets a move done to move into P2, but his Masters competitor, that being Antonio Reis, has come in incredibly early. I was going to mention right before we saw Jörg Monty race quite hard up towards the front of this field that since we've passed that 10-minute mark, we may see some drivers come in for some early pit stops. Antonio Reis is one of them right now. He exits in P20, spent 14.2 seconds stopped in the box. So Antonio Reis going for a bold strategy call. He may have to do a whole lot of fuel saving to actually make it to the checkered flag. But yeah, this is an interesting call from Antonio Reis. What do you make of this, Charles?
Well, I would say you made, that's that 10-minute mark. That's pretty close to the edge of what their fuel is. So there may be some saving involved. But on the flip side of that, he's got a 12-second gap in front of him, so he's got as much clean air as he's gonna need. So he should be able to run. If he felt like he was getting maybe held up in that group with Monty and Bomberg, Spindle, that top 5 top 6 up there, then this is a great strategy call on his part. He's now in clean air. He can run his laps as hard as he wants to go. So this may be a really, really good call.
I think Urigmani may be worried about the call that Antonio Reese just made. He may be worried that he has to push it, which could be the reason why Urigmani has taken the lead of the race. We're past the 10-man barrier and got some moves done on this lap to move into the lead of the race. We saw him with that bold move heading through turn number 1, and this is what he did to move into P number 1, heading into turn number 4. That's Bomberg on the outside, Mani on the inside. Fairly textbook stuff, it must be said, from the Swiss driver to move into P number 1. Nothing too flashy about Urigmani, just getting the job done there.
No, just laid on the brakes and was able to make the move to the inside and make the pass. It was well done. It is exactly the way you want to draw it up every time. So yeah, great move by Monty, and yeah, he's going to now see if he can pedal that car and get himself a gap amongst the rest of this group, and just that way he can run his laps. And yeah, it may be a good call on his part to get out front and push the pace a bit to maybe potentially, prevent that undercut from making up too much time.
So this lap is going to be very, very important. We're going to see how these drivers in this top 9 now, the top 9 pack, fare when it comes to their pace. And we're going to see how Antonio Reese does now that he's in clean air and out of the pits. We're seeing a move on David Foy that Steven just did to move into P2 in the S2 category. Nicely played for the drivers, running just barely inside the top 15 overall. They nearly made contact as well heading through turn number 4, but they managed to get away with it fairly scot-free. A little bit farther up the road is DeGassis, who's now in P2 in that Masters category. We haven't talked about him at all during this broadcast, but he's running quite nicely just outside the top 10 as things stand at the moment, right behind Megan Overstreet as things stand currently. And DeGassis with a fairly quiet run right now. I think it's going to be an uphill battle for him to move into the top 10 unless we see some schmozzles and some bot strategy calls farther up the road. However, DeGassis with a very good run so far.
Yeah, he's having a good run. He is, as you said, moved up to P2 in class after the race pit. And maybe he's just doing a little fuel saving behind Megan. Maybe the strategy is, I'm going to save a little bit of fuel here, run her pace, and then when I come in, I can take a little bit shorter pit stop and maybe leapfrog a couple of cars and get a little closer to that front group.
So I touched on it a little bit earlier on in this lap, and I'll bring it up again. Urigmani is quite fast right now. Last time by, he was in the 158.6s, I believe, if not the 158.7s. He's now in the 158.5s and just set his fastest lap of the race. Bomberg right behind just set the fastest lap of the race at a 158.35. So it's going to be a little bit of time before we see Antonio Reese, who I believe is about to come to the start-finish line in just a couple of moments' time. I'll see what lap time he sets here. Last time by was a 204.09, obviously, because he came down the pits. A 159.05 there for Antonio Reese. So not really too fast. The fact he's about a half a second slower than the drivers running up at the very north end of the field. However, Antonio Reese, what he has going for him is he has some clean air, which I don't think will help him out too much when it comes to fuel saving. However, his tires are going to be in a good condition come time for the end of this race, and he's not going to be preoccupied with any sort of major battles or drama right around him. He has clean air. He's going to be all by himself for a vast majority of this, so he may have to play some music just to feel a little bit less lonely right now, running on Lonely Island around turn number 4 at Snetterton. But I think Antonio Reese, even though pace-wise he was a half a second slower on that first lap out of the pits, I don't think it's entirely over for him just yet.
No, I don't think so either. He is now carrying more fuel than the lead car, so a half second off is probably not a bad time. He's, if you kind of factor that out, they're going to have to do that later on in the race as well. So it's a gamble, obviously, but so I think so far it's probably not paying off as much as he would like. But I think that the longer he gets out there and runs by himself, I think the better he's going to be. And I think maybe there's a little bit of a draft factor in amongst that lead group that's also making them a little bit quicker.
And that would explain why Bomberg set the fastest lap of the race last time by, as we see some brief alien abductions there from Benjamin Harris going down the start-finish straightaway. I'll take a look at my live timing screen once again. Alex Bomberg no longer has a fastest lap of the race. That honor has been taken by Roger Hooker, currently in P number 5. He set a 158.29 last time by. So all these drivers in the draft are benefiting from better fuel mileage, so they'll be able to stretch their legs off a teeny tiny bit more, and they're also benefiting in terms of lap time as well. Nick Von Roberts was also pretty quick last time by at a 158.41. So a lot of these drivers, they're in the comfort zone right now, even though it's 9 cars separated by about 3.2 seconds. It is a hornet's nest of Formula Ford cars as things stand over 15 minutes into this 40-minute race. However, these drivers, I think, are quite comfortable with the position they're in.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that right now we're in that lull, kind of the middle of the race, where everybody's just settled in, and we're just running some laps until it's time for the pit stop, and then we can start. We'll go back to really racing hard for the last 10 minutes of the race. I will say this: you talked about the fact that there's not a lot of help with braking markers and things like that. I will say this is probably the most broadcast-friendly track because they have signs up for all the corner names, so that's very helpful as we're watching.
That is, I've gotten lost on my fair share of tracks in my year covering races here on Apex Racing TV. What I've started doing is taking a screenshot of the iRacing track map and using it, because another big thing that I always used to have with broadcasts is my co-commentator and I would not often have the exact same track map, so some track maps are labeled differently, as we see Nick Vaughn coming into the pits, Nick Von Roberts in along with Hooker right behind. So the first 2 drivers outside of Antonio Reese have broken away from that top 9 pack, and Julian Ditchburn is now the tail of that, currently in P7. And those drivers are now down in the pits and up on, well, they're not up on the jacks, however, they are fueling up. These drivers, I don't think, would take tires, considering how this track isn't the most abrasive surface in the world, but stopped here for a decent amount of time, a very long time. Reese was out and away in 14 seconds. Von Roberts and Hooker are exceeding 20 now, so that is a very long stop for the both of them. Antonio Reese is actually going to jump them. Why on earth were they in the pits for so long there, Charles?
I'm going to just guess it's just inexperience, right? I think this is the first time we've seen either one of these drivers in the race. And I think it's just an experience thing, right? So just, we'll say, okay, well, the iRacing calculator says we may need this much fuel. If you look at it, it's 7 seconds, so it's probably an extra couple of laps of fuel that they won't, necessarily won't need for the race. Obviously, Antonio, being a lot more experienced, is pretty comfortable with the fueling and the fuel numbers. So I think that's probably it. It's just inexperience in this league.
So we're seeing some more drivers come in as well. Nick Tulo stopped in the box in the number 981 car. He's off and away. 19.1 seconds stopped as well. Brad Cathcart right in front of him has already come into the pits as well. So we're seeing some split strategies here. This isn't an oddball time to come into the pits either. We are approaching the halfway mark of this 40-minute race. So we could see those top 7 drivers that are still running in a tight pack, separated by less than 3 seconds currently. Right, as I say that, it goes over 3 seconds between our leader Monty and Julian Ditchburn, the leader in the S2 category. None of them have come into the pits on this lap. We could be seeing some very split strategies. We saw Reese come in basically as soon as he could, as soon as the clock ticked over 10 minutes. He was the first to come into the pits, and we saw Von Roberts and Hooker come in last time by, and we're still seeing the top 7 run line astern at the front of the field. Actually, Bomberg and Monty breaking away from Spinel there in P number 3, so we could see some gaps developing as well. And with these top 7 drivers, I doubt very highly they're all going to come into the pits in a nice even formation. We could see some split strategies for these drivers, and maybe some of the drivers that have spent a vast majority of this race in that slipstream, like Julian Ditchburn, who's been running at the tail end of this pack throughout a vast majority of it, maybe stretching his legs out past the minute 35 mark. How far do you think these drivers can really stretch their legs?
Normally, I'm just going to go off of what Antonio came in around the 10-minute mark. So my guess is that most everybody will be in about 31 minutes. Just saying that's probably the limit of the fuel. Obviously, there's you can save a little bit by by being in the middle of that pack, say like Tolo or Green or McConnell, Ditchburn. But then, you know, there's not really places that you can just kind of coast and do some really aggressive fuel saving here. Seems like you're on it pretty hard from the drop of the green flag. So, you know, my guess is 31 minutes as we see Antonio Reese making a pass, and that's past Jackson to pick up another positions up to P17 now.
And Antonio Reese has been quietly picking away at the spots. He was 20th when he came out of the pits not very long ago. That, I think, was the first move that he did on track. Of course, Vaughn Roberts and Hooker, who are now in P19 and P20, they came into the pits, so he just overtook them, blew their metaphorical doors off with her stopped in the box. But Antonio Reese pulls off his first move on track ever since he was in the midst of this Formula Ford Hornet's Nest, which have still not come into the pits yet. It's Monty leading them, Bomberg, the newcomer, in P number 2, Spittle in P3, locked steady, a nice fight between himself and Fortulo. They're the Brabham Esports Academy driver in the number 27 car. May look for a move heading into turn number 2, not close enough to get that move done. Then you've got Jason Green right behind, who's always I think he's probably a sneaky assassin when it comes to these Formula Ford Weekend Warriors broadcasts. We don't usually talk about him too much. However, he just comes out of nowhere, it feels. He's running in P5, which is a fantastic result. And then you've got Michael McConnell right behind him, Julian Ditchburn rounding out your top 7. All these drivers are putting together some pretty good races. Charles, this may be a bit of a loaded question, but what driver is surprising you the most inside that top 7?
You know, honestly, nobody. I mean, that looks pretty standard. Ditchburn obviously doing a really good job. You know, he had won that race, and it was a rain race. So, you know, to go out here in the dry and be able to run up in the top 7, hang in with that lead group, doing a good job. And Green is just one of those guys he's a fuel specialist. He runs, and this is his prime position. He likes just to be in this group, being able to conserve his fuel, shorten his pit stop, and that's why he's always up near the front at the end of the race. You know, when he doesn't get caught up in you know, incidents or things like that. If it's just a standard race like race like this where he can run clean, he'll just fuel save and then he'll make a short pit stop at the end, and usually gets him up around the top 5. And it's good to see this because we do have Spindle in 3rd, Green in 5th, and McConnell in 6th, and those are the 3 cars that are in the top of the Spec 1 class in the championship.
That is a great point that you bring up there, Charles. No drivers have really been able to pull away outside Julian Ditchburn in that S2 category. No one's been able to pull out a huge gap when it comes to the championship fight. Speaking of fights, this is Nick Vaughn and Roberts going side by side. Well, that was Nick Vaughn Roberts going side by side with Paul Jackson heading into turn number 9. Gets a move done with a little bit of lawn mowing on the outside of the turn. Currently running in P number 3 in the S2 category is David Foy, who's come into the pits as we see some side-by-side action with Tulo and Spindle battling for the final podium spot right now. Tulo not able to get the move done heading through turn number 2 there. But looking through, Bomberg's actually taken the lead of the race. I was just going to mention him. The newcomer to this series signed up just about an hour ago, and he has put on a very impressive show. Has led laps, started this race in P2, and is running in P number 1. David Foy exiting the pits in P20, so that's another position gained for Antonio Reese, again cutting through the field like a hot knife through butter. And David Foy, even, who is not a newcomer to this series, it was a pretty lengthy stop, 15.4 seconds stopped in the box there compared to Antonio Reese in the 14. So I wonder, did Antonio Reese go really aggressive when it comes to fueling his race car? Because that was a quite short stop, even compared to the drivers that are venerated in the series.
Yeah, I think that's the question, right? Is did he cut it too close? And we'll see. Obviously, as some of the lead cars come in, they won't have to stop. You know, their stops are going to be roughly in that 14-second range. You may see it. You know, Green come in and it'd be a 12-second stop. Monty actually up from running up front. You know, I've talked to him enough that, you know, he doesn't do fuel saving. He just says, I'm not comfortable doing it. So he runs as hard as he can always. So he's up there trying to compete. These guys that are running, it was a nice look by Tolo on the inside of Spindle, but they have to be very careful because they start going side by side through the corners and they'll lose these front 2 cars in a hurry.
Ooh, we nearly lost another car from this top 7 fight. I saw Julian Ditchburn. It looked like he considered coming down pit road. I saw the jink to go into the pits and he backed out of it. So I think Julian Ditchburn may be eyeing up pit road here in the not too distant future. We've got some contrasting stories between Julian Ditchburn, the leader in the S2 category, who unless he gets struck by a falling anvil, may be able to lock it up with a race or even 2 to spare here in that S2 class. And we have another driver coming into the pits, another S2 driver, that being Chris Montgomery, who stopped in the box in the number 3 at 13 car. But I mentioned Ditchburn, very experienced in the series, very fast as well. A driver who is fast but not has a lot of experience is our leader Bomberg. And since we have the pit stops coming up here in the not too distant future, I wonder if Bomberg is going to fall into the crutches of the mistakes that we've seen from other newcomers in this series. Will he overfuel and lose the race as a result of that, or do you think he's done his homework and is going to try and get the strategy on point here? What do you think's going to happen here, Charles?
I have no idea. Yeah, I mean, depending on how don't know how often he runs the car. My guess is he's obviously familiar with the track. It looks like he's familiar with the car, just from obviously the great pace he's got as we see Spindle and Monty going side by side through Brundle. Ooh, it was close.
Ooh, I think they made contact there.
Yeah, that was very, very close. But I will say this, Antonio Race is now matching the leader's pace, running in 15th. So his lap times are starting to pick up, and he's starting to make a little bit of inroads into that gap up front.
Yeah, Reese last time by was at a 158.6. Meanwhile, our leader Alex Bomberg was at a 158.5. As we see Antonio Reese, his rival Jorg Mani come into the pits. He nearly crashed into that Armco barrier. That looked very close from the camera angle that we had there. But Jorg Mani trundling his way down pit road. It feels like it takes forever when you're running at pit road speed compared to blasting down the start-finish straightaway here at Snetterton. Let's see how Mani exits out compared to Antonio Reese. It's going to be close. How long is he stopped in the box to gas us behind along with Jim Brewster? So we're seeing a flood of master drivers come into the pits. Monty in the pits shorter than Reese. However, I think Antonio Reese may exit out in front. It's going to be very close. I think Antonio Reese was unable to jump him there. You can see Antonio Reese in the back of shot. Jorg Mani spent a second and a half less down pit lane than Antonio Reese. So Jorg Mani, with that challenge and with the big turn of pace that he had throughout that first stint, is able to hold on to that Masters lead.
Yeah, he actually did a great job. That second and a half really helped. It was only 2/10 stopped, so they've basically taken the same amount of fuel. But his entry, as you said, nearly hitting the Armco, actually really helped him out. Gained him some time over Antonio Race, and that gap is, I believe, about 4 seconds. So that's the gap between Monty and Race, and so now we're going to see how this all filters out. You know, if the cars up front kind of filter in between them, Race absolutely has got a chance to make up some of that time just by being able to draft off the other cars. But it's going to take them a little bit to get there. We're probably within a lap or two of everybody coming down pit road.
We are 30 seconds away from the final 10 minutes of this race, about to hit that half an hour mark, and that will be when all those drivers, they have to come into the pits. If you don't, you have to serve some kind of penalty here for this series, so you have to come down pit lane at some point. It's just a matter of when you want to do it. Bomberg has stayed out. Meanwhile, right behind, all of them have come into the pit. Sam Spinell, Thor Tulo, Michael McConnell, Ditchburn, as well as Megan Overstreet coming into the pits. So Bomberg and Green being the only ones who are running in that top 6 to stay out here. A very interesting strategy call for them to stay out a little bit longer. I'm sure they have to cover here. They'll probably come down into the pits next time by, but Sam Spinell stopped in the box. How long is he stopped for? That was much quicker than Thor Tulo, about 3 seconds separating them. Stopped in the box. Thor Tulo with a very slow stop. He's now at risk of losing a position to Julian Ditchburn. Let's see how Jorg Mani exits out. I think that's going to be very close. close between Monty and Spinel heading through turn number 1. Megan Overstreet now exiting the pits, and yeah, you can see York Monty keeping tabs with Spinel. That was pretty similar times, and side by side heading into turn number 2 right now. Is Monty going to get the move done, or is it going to be Spinel holding out? Very close yet again. They made contact not very long ago. These gyros are giving it every single thing that they have. Monty was actually stopped in the pits for 1.2 seconds more than Spinel, so that was a blisteringly quick stop from the British driver in the number 113 car. But Monty, he does not like to take it easy. He wants to push that car to the absolute limit, and despite there being a 1.2 second discrepancy with them stopped in the pits, it was only 0.6 of a second that Spinel was down pit road compared to Monty. So again, that absolute send on pit entry helping Monty out a little bit. It's helped him get involved in this fight. These drivers still very close heading through the infield section.
Yeah, they're just, Monty is just just attached to the back of Spinel's car as they're coming down Bentley Straight, getting ready to head into that. And we already saw Monty send it too deep going into Brundle. Looks like he's going to be on the outside this time, which will give him the inside for the following corner, and we'll see if that makes a difference.
When our leader Bomberg has come in as these two drivers go side by side heading through Brundle of 9 heading into Nelson of 10, and a little bit nearly making contact yet again. Nicely played from York Monty. Very, very close to clearing him. He took it at the first opportunity that he had. Well done for York Monty, the top driver in the Masters category. But our top driver in the race is Bomberg. He's coming to the pits along with Jason Green. So as I predicted, those drivers covering off the move, and Bomberg stopped in the pits for 14.2 seconds. This is going to be tense with the drivers at the front of the field. Green was stopped in the pits for nearly 2 seconds less than our leader Bomberg, who's exited with the lead. So Alex Bomberg had to put in some fantastic laps to exit with the lead after spending so long down pit lane. 37.7 seconds down the pits, which is quite slow. Thortulo with a very slow stop was only at a 37.8 there. So I think Bomberg may be counting his lucky stars, the fact that he has been able to exit with the lead still. And Jason Green has benefited from this quite a lot. Was only in the box for 12.1 seconds, and he's exited out in P2. Very well done for the driver of the 160 car.
Yes, I mean, that's really Green's calling card is just a,
oh my God. That is Sam Spinel.
I think there might have been some contact there. I saw him sideways in the air as he came into the camera shot there. So I'm sure we're going to get a replay there. It's him and Monty, and we'll see how this all worked out here as we see Spinel behind Monty. Is he going to make a move to the inside here and try and break late? Oh, no.
Oh, no.
Monty just broke early, and just Spinel was not expecting that at all. And contact was made, Spinel flying through the air. Luckily, didn't flip over. But obviously that basically changes the race for him. He's out of it. So we get another view here. It just like Monty maybe just checked up a little more quicker than Spinel was expecting, and just not enough time to make that move to the inside, and the contact was made.
I wonder if there's any damage on York Monty's race car. That was a surprising accident for him, just seeing Sam Spinel's Formula Ford race car fly in front of him. It was very surprising for us in the commentary booth as well. But York Monty has now fallen into the crutches of Julian Ditchburn right behind. We'll see, is the steering straight on that Formula Ford car? I'm gonna move my track map to see if that's the case. I think there may be a little bit, actually no, it looks good. I thought there's a little bit of a tweak there. He was just rounding the bend coming onto the start finish straight away. But York Monty, I think he should consider himself a very lucky man. The fact he got away with that without picking up any sort of major suspension damage, because that was a fairly decent whack on both the front and rear end of that race car. Yeah,
for sure. It looked like it was wheel-to-wheel contact, but even at that speed and that the speed difference between those two cars, yeah, it was a pretty significant hit. And for him to still be running and still running third, now he's got a little bit of work to do if he's going to try and battle. But to go back to Green, that's kind of his MO, right? Is fuel save. He was in a good spot. He was able to save that extra lap of fuel. Then, cut it short on the pit stop, was able to make the leap over all those cars, and now is running second.
Well, making leaps over cars has two meanings in this race. That was quite fitting as they went through turn number 4. Only a lap after that incident happened with Sam Spinell. That's going to hurt him in the championship fight. Spinell entered this race in P3 in the S1 category. Now he's running all the way down in 9th. That is not ideal for the British driver to be 9.7 seconds back of our leader, Bomberg. I mean, there's still a decent ways to go here with this season of the Formula Ford Weekend Warriors. I think 3 races left to go after we get the checkered flag in a couple of moments time. However, Sam Spinell is definitely going to be on the back foot entering the final trifecta of races from this season. Spinell heading his way into that turn 9 and 10 chicane in just a couple of moments time. I am shocked the fact that corner hasn't caught at as many drivers as I was expecting it to. I was fully expecting, from my experience at this track, the only other broadcast I've done of a race at Snetterton was in the Apex Racing Academy F4 Championship, and as our producer Josh can attest, we saw some drivers go into low Earth orbit coming through that section. So it's quite surprising that these drivers have not had any sort of incidents at all heading through that chicane. Very impressive indeed. Julian Ditchburn maybe losing a spot to Thor Tulo here side by side, heading their way into turn number 1 in just a few moments time. Tulo on the outside, Ditchburn sliding his way around, and look at that, that's Vaughn Roberts sliding his way through to move into P number 4. Fantastic move from the Welsh driver in the number 29 car. Very nicely played. He was thinking, seeing those two drivers heading into that corner side by side and nearly making contact, I'm sure he was thinking through his head, these two knuckleheads are about to crash into each other. Let me cut down to the inside and pick off both of them. This is a fantastic camera angle. Riding on board with him, Ditchburn with a massive send, making contact with Tulo, heading through turn number 1. Tulo with a fantastic drift through the grass on the outside turn number 1, but Nick Vaughn Roberts just slides through. That was a slick, very, very slick move from the driver of the number 29 car.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to go to show, not only was he did he make a good move there, this last lap was a 57.42, which is about, I want to say, a half second faster than the fastest lap we've had for the entire race. So obviously he's a man on a mission, and they made it quite easy for him to get through there. It is, to be said. So great job by him. He's now up on the podium.
And holy cow, 157.417. I think that may be on par with the pole speeds that the drivers were setting in the qualifying session. Nick Vaughn Roberts, he didn't take tires. He definitely took fuel. He didn't take tires. He may have taken some nitrous, though, because to be in the 157s, I'll fact check myself on this, but I think that may be on par with the pole position time. Either way, Nick Vaughn Roberts with a fantastic turn of pace coming into the later stages of this race. Nicely played from him. Antonio Reese is running right behind Jorg Mani, so with that contact and big whack that Jorg Mani had in that incident with Sam Spinell not very long ago, Mani has now come into the pits. So Jorg Mani, this is a disastrous turn of fortune for the driver of the 925 car. If he didn't have bad luck, he would have no luck at all. And Antonio Reese in the dying stages of this race, probably, I think we're on 2 to go, so we're going to be taking the white flag next time by. Antonio Reese has now taken the lead in that Masters category. Yeah,
it's kind of weird. Monty's times weren't terrible. I mean, he still had pretty good pace in the car. So maybe just felt like it was becoming to the point it was just undrivable. So he came in, took a little bit of fuel, fast repair, and said, "All right, I'll come back out and we'll finish this race up." And obviously, he's still P3 in class, so he'll still get a podium position in the Masters class. But that elevates obviously Reese up to P1. And DeGass is up to P2, who's having a really good run, running 11th.
I'm curious. I wonder, we may have an alien abduction here. Alex Bomberg, who's on his course to a dramatic win here, is now blinking in and out of existence. Alex Bomberg, the standout star from this race, is blinking in and out. Hopefully that connection issue is resolved for him. Oh, I think he's popped back onto track. That would be heartbreak for the driver of the number 14 car. Man, I was getting some flashbacks to the alien abductions of Canadian Tire a few weeks ago, about a month ago at this point where we saw that happen. That would have been a heartbreak for Alex Bomberg. Thankfully for his sake, I think we will be taking the checkered flag this time by. There's only 5 seconds left on the clock, and he's about to enter his way into that final corner of Murray's right now. And Alex Bomberg, the standout star and the debutant here from the Weekend Warriors Formula Ford Series, is going to take the checkered flag in a couple of moments time to win here at Snetterton. He's drifting his way around the track. Don't crash into the wall right now. Alex Bomberg wins here at Snetterton. Then Jason Green, if there was a bit of a connection issue there with Bomberg, Jason Green would probably have to buy a lottery ticket. And then Nick Von Roberts, who I did fact check this, but that 157.8 that he just set on that last lap was pretty good, as fastest lap of the race was about 0.3 of a second quicker than the pole speed here. So Nick Von Roberts, with a fantastic turn of pace, ends up in P number 3. Megan Overstreet in her comeback finishes just outside the top 10 here in P11. Still very impressive result from the driver that we haven't seen race in this series pretty much this entire season. Megan Overstreet coming back to the series, putting on a pretty impressive and clean drive as well. Michael McConnell ended up in P7, and right in front of him was the two drivers in the S2 and Masters category. Julian Ditchburn ended up winning there in S2 and extending his lead in that championship fight. And Antonio Reese, after finishing P3 and winning in the Masters category the past 2 races, wins once again in Masters. However, he finishes P6 overall. This man, Alan DeGassis, ends up second in that Masters category. That was very dramatic. If that was a disconnect for Bomberg, that would have been absolute heartbreak. But he ended up taking the checkered flag. The power of a verbal threat, I guess, to the company that supplies his internet connection. I think Charles. Nope.
I think I'm back now. Sorry about that. So yeah, maybe almost an alien abduction here on my side as well, or just me hitting the mute button. Either way, no, really good race. Top 8 cars or so just put on a really good show. Battled hard from start to finish. Obviously, the pit stops, kind of stretched those out a bit, but still, yeah, Bomberg made it a little interesting there at the end, trying to blink out of existence, but gets the win in his debut. So fantastic job by him. And yeah, Von Roberts, wow, what a drive. Fastest lap of the race, P3 overall, also on debut. So, just great racing.
That was a fantastic race all around. Had a whole lot of storylines, some schmozzles as well. That big contact with Monty and Spinell heading through into turn number 4, I think was the biggest drama from that race, it must be said. Well, that and Bomberg blinking in and out of existence on the last lap, that was pretty big as well. But in terms of incidents, very clean. All those drivers put on a pretty good, pretty clean, very respectful racing, but exciting as well. And I think we'll get the results here in just a couple of moments time from the Formula Ford Weekend Warriors at Snetterton. It ends up being the debut driver Alex Bomberg in the number 14 car taking the checkered flag, just about a second separating himself and Jason Green in P number 2. A fantastic strategy call and a blisteringly quick stop leads the American to finish in P number 2. The Nick Von Roberts, the Welsh driver who put on a fantastic move in the dying stages of that race and had some great pace as well, he rounds out your podium in 3rd. That's Thortula there in 4th. Julian Ditchburn, the top drivers in the S2 category, he ends up in P5 overall. Antonio Reese in 6th, a nice result from him. Michael McConnell in 7th, Sam Spinell in 9th, Roger Hooker in P number 9. Benjamin Harris, we didn't really talk about him too much besides some alien abductions we saw during the qualifying session. He ends up in P10. Megan Overstreet, in their first race here from a Formula Ford Weekend Warriors in quite some time, ends up in 11th. Alan DeGassis, the second driver in that Masters category, in 12th. David Foy in 13th. Jorg Mani, heartbreak towards the end, was stopped in the pits for only 8 seconds. It wasn't a drive-through or a penalty or anything like that, but Jorg Mani, that is going to sting. P14 overall, not ideal for him. And Paul Stevens will round out your top 15.
Yeah, Philip Fernandez in 16th, Chris Montgomery 17th, Jim Brewster in 18th. As we flip to the next screen here, we've got Peter True in 19th, Pedro Carvalho in 20th, Paul Jackson 21st, Brad Cathcart in 22nd, Nick Tolo in 23rd, Johan Batinga 24th, Greg Holland, last car on the lead lap in 25th, followed by Russ Telker, 1 lap down in 26th. Tim Stano with the early incident finishes 27th. Morn Human, 28th. Jeff Jacobson, John Toms round out the 30 car field. They never took the start, so that is your 30 car finishing results.
A very clean race here from Snetterton, it must be said, and the driver that ended up taking the checkered flag, the top of the drivers, the newcomer is Alex Bomberg. We'll bring him in here for a quick little chat, just drag him into the commentary booth by the collar. Alex, congratulations on the win, and thank you for joining us here on this broadcast. It was a dramatic race from your perspective, so just talk us through that there.
Yeah, I mean, maybe it was a bit less dramatic from the cockpit than from what it looked like on the stream, but the first sort of, 40 minutes until the stop, I was just coasting around trying to save the fuel. So I had to put as little in as possible at the stop. And then I came out of the pits with a bigger gap than I thought. And it was really just a case of keep it on the track. But it was quite busy at the start, lots of cars. So yeah, it's just a case of working together with Sam and hitting our fuel targets, which we did.
And correct me if I'm wrong here, but this is your first ever Weekend Warriors Formula Ford race, if I'm not mistaken. Just came into the series right before this race started here this afternoon. So pretty good race, it must be said, if this is your debut.
Yeah, it is. I think I was signed up for it like 10 minutes before the session launched. No, Sam just messaged me saying if I wanted to have a go, and I haven't been on iRacing in a while, so did a lot of practice. My pace was actually a lot better than I thought it'd be, to be honest, and I think everything in the race just kind of went my way, and yeah, not a bad result for the first one.
Well, not bad at all, taking the checkered flag, the top of the 30 drivers that we had here this afternoon. We may have you as a convert here for the Formula Ford Weekend Warriors. So if you join us next week at Imola, what are your thoughts heading into that race?
I'd have to do some practice, see where my pace is. But it was super fun. I love the strategy side of it, trying to hit the fuel targets. So I think it'll be similar in Imola. I'm not sure whether the slipstream will be quite as strong as it is here at Snetterton. So maybe it'd be a little bit less fuel saving, a little bit less slipstream. But it's a great track, so I look forward to it.
That's going to be an interesting race in a week's time, and I'm going to put out the bet a week early, probably more exciting than the F1 race we're going to have there in a week's time in real life. But Alex Bomberg, thank you for joining us here in the commentary booth. Is there anyone you want to give a thanks to or shout out?
My number 2 driver teammate, Sam Spinell. Thank you to him.
There you go. You always got to thank your teammates. Congratulations on the win, and hopefully we see you out on track a lot more here for the Formula Ford Weekend Warriors. Congratulations on the win in your debut.
Cheers, guys. Thank you.
That was Alex Bomberg. The driver on debut ends up taking the checkered flag in P1. Fantastic result for him. Really hopeful that we see him on track throughout the rest of the season. Now, Charles, who do you like to have a chat with?
Well, let's talk to our Masters winner and P6 overall, Antonio Race. And Antonio, congratulations, another Masters class win. Looked like you were looking for the undercut. How do you think that worked out for you?
Oh, it worked very bad because I was messing up with the fuel, so I was saving fuel for nothing, like 5 or 6 laps. Then I realized I didn't need to save it. So anyway, well, it is what it is.
Yeah, it was some pretty good battling up at the front of the field. It looks like a pretty interesting race from just the outside observers. I don't know how you felt about it.
Oh, I just pulled out from there because I was getting hit from behind. I was hitting the guys in the front, so I was kind of a little bit worried about future going something to happen more heavy, and then I just pull out from that. That's why I pit earlier. To avoid, I don't want to crash anyone.
Yeah, for sure.
So,
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, do you have anybody you want to give a thanks to before we let you go and get ready for the SRF race?
Yeah, sure. I got always for Steve Ray and, for the community and for you guys broadcasting. You are doing an amazing job. And to all the viewers.
All right. Thanks, Antonio. Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. See you on the spec race.
All right.
And that was Antonio Reese, the driver that wins out in the Masters category. And now we do have that Spec Racer Ford race to look forward to. Our producer Josh is going to be a part of that race, and that's going to be an interesting one. I got some experience running in the officials earlier on this week, and when I say earlier on this week, I mean just yesterday. But it's still, that is going to be a very interesting Spec Racer Ford race. And interesting and exciting would probably be the two words I would use to describe the race that we just had here from the Formula Fords at Snetterton. Charles, one last question before we wrap things up here. From this Snetterton race, just what are your thoughts on the race that we just had and what we have coming up at Imola in a week's time?
No, this was a good race. I really enjoyed it. Obviously, you know, you had a clear group of fast drivers up front. They raced hard. One incident really that I can recall, but for the most part, really clean racing from top to bottom, and yeah, it was good. And Imola is just it's a whole different animal, right? Lots of elevation changes, lots of a couple of really hard chicanes that you're going to have to deal with. Some good places to do some drafting. As Antonio said, not Antonio, but Alex said maybe not as much as here. But it still should be very interesting, and Imola is just one of those iconic race circuits that doesn't matter what kind of cars you put out there, it makes for some really good racing.
Imola is going to be a good one. That's going to be hectic as well, with a whole lot of corners and opportunities for these drivers to sneak a wheel down the inside or possibly make a mistake. We'll just have to wait and see what that race is like in 1 week's time. But here for the Formula Ford Weekend Warriors, for part one of the Weekend Warriors here on this Sunday, May 12th, that will do it here. So for myself, Ron Mullins, Charles Bichelle joining me in the commentary booth, and our fantastic producer Josh Wilkie doing a great job in the virtual production hauler, I say thank you all so much for watching. Have a great rest of your 2 o'clock hour, and we hope to see you in about an hour's time for the Spec Racer Ford Weekend Warriors.
Are you struggling for consistency in your sim racing? Does your iRating look like a roller coaster? If so, we have good news for you. The way to get more consistent is to first understand what you're doing differently than the professionals. And VRS is the answer. With our competitive subscription, you will have the telemetry, setups, tutorials, and everything else you need to fully analyze your driving. Our data packs and the ability to compare your driving with the best in the world will show you exactly where to adjust your inputs, change your driving line, and shave seconds off of your lap times. And our powerful and precise Direct Force Pro wheelbase and precision pedals are being used by some of the world's best drivers. All these champions agree that VRS hardware is not just the best on the market, it's also priced well below the competition. So if you're looking to upgrade to direct drive and the best pedals in sim racing, VRS is your answer. If you want to get better, get faster, and make it happen sooner rather than later, you owe it to yourself to find out why so many people are switching to VRS. You'll be so glad that you did. Visit www.virtualracingschool.com and learn why the best use VRS.